Hello and welcome to From the Nosebleeds, podcast brought to you by myself, Walter Limbeck, and Jacob Wetzel. How are we doing tonight, Wetzel?
Doing pretty good. Got Maction back. It's nice to have football on a Wednesday night too. I think this is the first Wednesday night game we've had this year, so we got I think like six of them. So
Yeah,
feeling
we
pretty
got
good.
six games going on right now. We'll do a quick look at the scoreboards there. We got Kent State leading Eastern Michigan currently just actually scored to take the lead there in the fourth. Got 7:30 left there. Western Michigan's blowing out Akron 51-13. Akron was winless last year. They showed signs of life early. They had an onside kick to start the game, which was pretty awesome. Buffalo's at halftime with Northern Illinois leading 21-16. Ohio and Central Michigan just started back up, and they are tied 20-20 after the lights went out. Ball State just starting the second half, up 14-10 at Miami, Ohio. Got Bowling Green down 21-0 currently to Toledo at just the start of the second quarter. Had a little bit of everything so far from these games. Turnovers, missed kicks, mixed extra points, and like I said, even the lights went out in the Central Michigan Ohio game. So a lot of
Hmm.
crazy stuff happens in the MAC.
Oh yeah, and that's why we love it.
Yep. Uh, I know I've got Central Michigan money line there, and I've got Ball State money line as well. You want to talk about what you have on that on night games tonight?
Yeah, I got Central Michigan money line as well. Got the parlay of Kent State money line, Buffalo money line, and Miami of Ohio money line. And then the Bowling Green plus 23.5, which they're currently covering, but I think it's only a matter of time until Toledo
Yeah,
scores again. So,
yeah,
um,
that's the only one that's not looking too great. Um, I don't know. I've been watching this Central Michigan Ohio game. The quarterback for Central Michigan looks pretty good. Ohio's looked pretty good too. They've used both their quarterbacks that they talked about using. One to transfer from UNLV, the other the younger brother of their quarterback last year. Um, yeah, it's been a good game, a lot of points. Probably should have taken the over there, but missed that one. It's been a good game. Have you been watching any other games?
I've been flipping back and forth between that game and the Ball State Miami of Ohio game. It's kind of a scary moment in the Ball State Miami of Ohio game. The Miami of Ohio quarterback took a hit and didn't look quite right. Stayed down for a little bit, but Miami Ball State and Miami of Ohio, two teams I think kind of have I think are like middle of the pack. Finished decent last year. They just kind of neither one of them are that great. But I've been watching that game, and then right now I got the Eastern Michigan Kent State game on, which is getting a little closer than it was a couple of minutes ago when I checked. So
Yeah.
flipping back and forth between those games, and hopefully we can win some money.
Yep. So we'll keep an eye out on those as we go throughout tonight. But let's get into a recap of week 9. And we'll start in a game that didn't include Trevor Lawrence, but DJ Ungalele, I believe I'm saying that correct, uh, started and he looked fine, but Clemson, they had themselves a tough game against Boston College, only winning 34-28. What were your thoughts on this game, Wetzel?
Um, I think my first thought was I was kind of surprised with how bad Clemson's defense played. I know I think their offense wasn't helping them out too much in the first half. I mean, Clemson or Boston College put up 28 points in the first half, but and then Clemson's defense shut them out in the second half. But I guess I expected more out of Clemson's defense, especially when they knew Lawrence wasn't going to play. Thought they would step up a little bit. Um, Boston College, I followed a couple of their games. They turn the ball over a lot. They throw a lot of interceptions. They fumble it. They always are losing the turnover battle. So I kind of thought Clemson's defense would really take advantage of that. But um, that was kind of my first thought. But their defense picked up in the second half. My second thought, I didn't watch too much of this game, but I think against Notre Dame, Clemson will probably rely on ETN a little more. Um, to run the ball. Notre Dame's defense isn't great, but they're not terrible. So I think they'll kind of say we're not gonna put a lot of pressure on the young kid. He didn't look great his first game out. So I mean, he threw 41 passes, but I don't think they want him throwing that many on a national stage against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this game was. I think it spoke more to me on the Clemson defense because I talked about last week they were going into this game top 10 defense. I thought they were going to rely on them a little more, run the ball, establish the run, and get going early.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't really do that. Actually had to play catch up from the get-go. So that's why DJ had to throw 41 passes. I actually didn't think he looked too bad. He's only a freshman, made his first start in a shortened week for him, as he only found out about starting on Thursday, I believe. So he had little time to prepare. Thought he did really well. Again, I think that it speaks more on the Clemson defense. They're going to have to play better against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame matches up pretty well with them on the defensive side of the ball. Not too sure about their offense. I'm not real big on Ian Book, but we'll get more into that game later on. Next game I want to talk about is the Ohio State game. In Happy Valley, they go in there, win 38-25. I didn't think watching the game, it didn't look as close as the score may lead you to believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. It kind of just felt like Penn State was playing catch up the whole night. They would take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back by allowing an easy touchdown to Ohio State. I mean, Justin Fields 28 for 34, 318 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's first 2 games. I mean, he's playing lights out. I actually thought I didn't think Clifford played that bad. 18 for 30, 281, and 3 touchdowns with an interception. But Penn State's got some good wide receivers. I think that's a positive. I think they can take out of the game. But I think this game shows the especially with Michigan losing to Michigan State, this game shows the gap between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten. Going into the year before, kind of everything, I think everyone thought Penn State was going to be the number 2 team and in the conference, and they aren't as close to Ohio State as I think maybe the initial rankings thought. I think Ohio State is I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the Big Ten. And I think as long as Fields keeps playing at this high level, I don't think that there's any defense in the Big Ten that's going to be able to stop him, and they're going to put up 35 points a game the entire year.
Yeah, I would agree. They looked a little bit better running the ball, didn't have to rely on Fields as much as they did in week 1. So I
Fields
thought that was
their leading rusher this week.
Yeah, so I thought that was a positive for them going forward. I think Penn State, I still think they're probably the second best team in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on with Wisconsin when they'll play again. Though Penn State will get some of their running backs figured out, get the running game figured out, because they didn't run the ball especially well against Ohio State, but I think they'll get that figured out. Like you said, Clifford looked pretty good. Offensively, you can have a lot of positive takeaways from this game. I think the one thing I want to keep an eye out going forward is Ohio State's defense. I talked about it last week. Didn't look great against Nebraska. Again, here, they didn't look great. Stopped the run, but, they're going against the 4th and 5th string running back for Penn State. So I want to keep an eye on that going forward. I think it's definitely something to monitor as they move throughout this year. The next game I want to talk about is an old-fashioned SEC game that happened between Georgia and Kentucky that was really ugly and really hard to watch. Georgia pulled out a victory 14-3 in this one. Yeah, it was just ugly. I don't know what you thought.
It was tough to watch as 2 people that had the over. It was tough to watch. I know Kentucky's offense is not good, but I think it really showed how good Georgia's defense is. I know they got gashed by Alabama's offense, but Bennett was 9 for 13, 131 yards, 2 interceptions, and their defense, they still had put up 14 points. Their defense still held them to 3. Their defense, I think, is really going to keep them in, if not outright win them ball games this year, simply by not allowing their team to score. This was, I think, the game we predicted, though. Maybe we predicted Georgia scoring more, but we thought, I think I said, and you said as well, Kentucky's not going to score more than 10 points. They're going to struggle to move the ball. They're not going to put up points. They only put up 3. I think again, I don't think you can bench Bennett when all he's done is win, but I know you want Daniels in there. You think that he'd be a better fit at quarterback, but I think as long as Georgia's winning, I think Bennett should keep at quarterback. But it's tough to look at this game and make that argument, though, with the line he put out there statistically.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Georgia, too, is they always have a good running back. So in those bigger games, they can really rely on the running game. I kind of agree with you, and I was doing some research into the whole JT Daniels situation. They asked Coach about it on Monday, and apparently there is still a lingering issue with JT and his knee. He did have an ACL tear last year and is coming back from that, so it appears that it's still lingering, and that's why he's not getting in. However, he was taking reps with the second team during practice this week so far, so it'll be interesting to keep an eye on going forward.
You look at their schedule. Obviously, they got Florida this week, but, I mean, they're at Missouri, home against Mississippi State, at South Carolina, and home against Vanderbilt. So after this week, a pretty easy schedule. So, if they were to bring him back, they definitely have some opponents where, you think that they're going to be up pretty handily and they can bring him back no issue, assuming that his knee's good to go.
Yeah. I'd agree. And, I mean, I think like I've said, I think he just gives them a better chance to win. Stetson Bennett's been a nice story, but ultimately Georgia's still in the race to, get in the SEC championship game. Not only that, but also get into the college football playoffs. So they got to win games. So I think it gives them a better chance. I don't think it's if. I think it's when. Hope he gets back out there soon, because I thought he had a really good year at USC his freshman year before he went down last year. Next game we'll get into, though, is – big one, I think, because I think this ends the chances of this conference getting a playoff team, and it's Texas beating Oklahoma State in overtime, 41-34. What were your thoughts, Wetzel?
I watched majority of this game. Kind of two thoughts of it is number one, I thought Oklahoma State's defense did not play as well as they did the week before against Iowa State. I think that their defense was kind of a letdown for them this week. I mean, 41 points, but they gave up 41 points only on 287 yards, and obviously one of them was the kick return. Mm-hmm. But Texas didn't turn the ball over once. They were 2 of 15 on third down, which is good, but then they pick up 2. They're 2 for 2 on fourth down. So just kind of not able to create any turnovers, try to not create any changes for their offense, instant changes. And then the second thing I came away with was Sam Ehlinger. I think coming into the year, he was probably the best quarterback in the league. I think today, or on Saturday, I think he showed he's probably the best quarterback in the Big 12. He's, you look at this game, you look at the game against Oklahoma, 2 games where he's, you mentioned it last time, he's all they have. And this was another game that showed, they go as far as he's going to take them on offense. So those are kind of 2 things I took away in Oklahoma State. I mean, 4 turnovers, that's 3 fumbles lost, 1 interception. You can't win. You're not going to win a game with 4 interceptions or 4 turnovers.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, Spencer Sanders having to throw the ball 39 times is never what Oklahoma State wants to do. Turnovers definitely cost them the game. That big kick return,
Mm-hmm.
certainly helped out Texas. And I'd agree with you with Sam Ellinger. He is this team, and you almost feel bad for the guy because he puts his heart and soul into Texas, and he can only do so much. He's a one-man wrecking crew, but can only do so much, and can't pull out every game like that. But the next game I want to get into is Cincinnati-Memphis. Cincinnati, second straight week. They look very impressive. I actually had the under on this game hit late, but we'll talk about that a little later. Cincinnati, though, comes away 49-10, and this is. I'm gonna ask you a question right now.
Mm-hmm.
How many Power 5 teams can look as convincing as Cincinnati has in the last 2 weeks against SMU and Memphis, or two offenses on the same playing field as SMU and Memphis?
I mean, I don't think that there's a defense out there that's looked better than Cincinnati. Yeah, I mean, those SMU and Memphis, two high-powered offenses that they've kept down. I mean, you want to say probably Georgia or, I mean, I guess there's not really a dominant defense in the Big Ten, but or the ACC. But I mean, Georgia's probably only the better defense in the entire country the way it's looking. But I mean, you look at these scores for Cincinnati: 20 points to Austin Peay, 10 to Army, 7 to USF, 13 to SMU, and 10 to Memphis. I mean, that's a legit defense right there. You're playing a triple option in Army. You only allow 10 points. You're playing two high-powered spread offenses, and you allow 23 points in 2 games. I mean, their defense is legit, and I think that they deserve a little more credit on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, the offense hasn't looked too bad. It's not pretty when you watch, but they get the job done, and they're scoring, over 30 points pretty consistently outside of that Army game. So, I mean, like you said, this defense is legit. Probably one of the better defenses in the country, I would say. And, they're not getting 4 or 5 star fancy recruits. Luke Fickell's doing it with the smaller recruits and just building that talent up. And like I said last week when I was talking about the under, Luke Fickell has come into Cincinnati and preached defense, and now all his guys are there, and you can tell the results on the field are astonishing pretty much when you're playing in the AAC where most teams are high-powered offenses.
Yeah, so, and you're looking at unders for future. I mean, they play Houston, which is a high-powered offense. They play East Carolina, which can score the ball with Ahlers back at quarterback, and then they play UCF. So, I mean, those are 3 pretty good offenses the next couple of weeks. I mean, really, you're talking about betting the under with Cincinnati. It's really coming down to how much does Cincinnati's offense score. I mean, they put up some points the last couple of weeks, so it's almost like you want Cincinnati to not score a ton on offense as much as they've been doing in order for you to get that under.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird seeing their offense do so well. Again, Fickell's done a great job. I've actually heard him mentioned by a couple college football analysis in Michigan job if Harbaugh does end up getting fired.
He's an Ohio guy, I think. So I think
he is. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if he sticks around. I'm sure he's definitely getting looks from bigger schools.
Yeah.
Next game I want to get into though is one that a little deceiving on the scoreboard. Texas A&M won 42-31. Arkansas scored 14 points in the fourth quarter, helped me get a backdoor cover. But this is, I think, the best game all around that Texas A&M played. Kellen Mond looked really good. They had a solid running game, not great, but it was solid. They played pretty well on defense until that fourth quarter when they gave up 2 touchdowns. I think this was an all-around game from Texas A&M, and they probably should have won by more.
Kent State's the first winner of the night for the MACtion.
Mm.
Yeah, I think this is what A&M expected for the year under Fisher. Now I think his third year at A&M. I mean, we didn't expect too much from Arkansas. We kind of didn't expect them to be around in games. So, like you said, they really weren't in the game. Then they get the 2 late touchdowns. But I watched that A&M against Florida game a few weeks ago, and I liked what I saw from their offense. This is another game where their offense looks pretty good. They put up 14 points in each quarter, except for the fourth quarter where it was all backups. So, offensively, they're playing really good. I don't think they really are caring about the 14 points late in the game, but Texas A&M, they're in a tough division over there with Alabama and Auburn and LSU and all those teams. But I think A&M is getting to that place where they want to be after a couple good wins. And offensively, I think that they're really starting to put it together. I think Kellen Mond, who seems like he's been there for a couple years now, I think he's starting to become the guy that people thought he was going to be. So I was impressed looking at the box score of what A&M did offensively. I think that they did against an Arkansas defense that's been pretty stout this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said there. Kellen Mond finally looks comfortable, I think, in Jimbo Fisher's offense. Took it, those first 2 years, he didn't really look too comfortable. Now he finally looks comfortable, and they look to be hitting the ground on offense. So that's a positive from them. Arkansas is still a stingy team. So that's what I take away from Arkansas. They're going to play to the end, no matter what the score is. But yeah, I agree. I was very impressed with their offense on A&M's side, and think that was, their best all-around game, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Next game I want to look at goes to another SEC team, and it's Florida winning 41-17 against Missouri. I thought Missouri was gonna score a little more points because that Florida defense, especially coming off the COVID layoff, but Florida's defense actually probably had their best game of the year. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they definitely did. You look at the box score; they held Missouri to under 250 yards, got 2 turnovers, they only allowed 1.7 yards per rush from Missouri. So, best game that their defense has played by far. From Florida, but this is another game where you look at their offense, and it's another impressive game by their offense. And I've same with A&M. I've watched a couple of their games now. I've seen Florida play a couple times. I've been very impressed with them offensively. But if they want to win, they have to have more games like this from their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that fight that happened right about halftime. Maybe woke some guys up, or maybe change. Who really knows? But I think if Florida wants to compete in the SEC with Georgia, in that SEC East, I think their defense has to play like this, because what you're going to get from their offense. They've done it all year. This hasn't been anything new offensively for them.
Yeah, I'd agree. Definitely need this defense to continue to show up like this if they want to compete with Georgias and Alabamas of the world. The next game I want to talk to you about is actually a team you're pretty high on. Not in a conference. BYU over Western Kentucky, 41-10. Zach Wilson looked really impressive. This is one of the first games I actually really watched of BYU's, and he did impress me a lot. I wasn't as high on him as you have been, but I came away pretty impressed. I'm still not sure if he's a first-round grade, but he's definitely got the Heisman buzz, and he's definitely got some of the intangibles that you look for. And this was kind of a bad beat for both of us because we were both chasing the over in this late game, and I kind of fell asleep in the second half. But apparently, so did both offenses.
Yeah. I mean, I fell asleep. I watched Western Kentucky go on that 10-minute long drive that ended in a goal line stand by BYU, and woke back up in the fourth quarter, and it was like the same score. And um, yeah, kind of a crazy second half. But there wasn't a lot of points. I think there was 10 points scored in the entire second half. So
Yeah.
um, I think Western Kentucky started Pigram, transfer from Maryland. Um, I think they're expecting a little bit better things out of him. They didn't quite get it, but this game is all about BYU. Zach Wilson, you kind of hit on it. Another good night, 18 for 32, 224, 3 touchdowns, interception. To me, I think when you watch him, he's shown you that he can make every pass you need him to make. He can throw it to the other sideline. He can hit the tough out route, throw the deep ball, fit in zone coverages. He's made every throw I think NFL scouts want him to make. And then I think the other thing we look at BYU is their defense has played. I mean, you can look at the competition, say what you want. They'll get their test on Friday night against BYU, which is a game I'm really excited to watch. But I think their defense has been the bright spot for them this year with how well they've played. They get off the field, they force punts, they turn the ball over. So I think their defense is what is if they want to get that group of 5 bid is going to be what's the most important thing.
Yeah, I would agree. And, the only thing I would say is the best offense they've played so far is Houston, in my mind.
Hmm.
And, that first half against Houston, the defense didn't look great. But then they came out in the second half and they shut them down and took control of that game pretty easily. So I'd agree. Pretty impressive for the defense to be playing like it is. They need to continue that going into Friday night. And we'll see. That's a big game to watch out for on Friday night. The next game I want to talk about is in the Big Ten, and I think a bit of overreaction happened going into the lines for this one. As you get Michigan State pulling off a win against Michigan 27-24. I kind of want to pair this one with the Minnesota game. Minnesota lost Friday night 45-44 in overtime against Maryland after Maryland looked atrocious on offense against Northwestern. So I think, week one, as we're going forward with the Big Ten, I think it's going to speak more on how bad Minnesota's defense is. They lost 8 or 9 guys on defense last year. So I think Michigan winning that game the way they did will speak more on Minnesota's defense than it actually speaks on Michigan. Michigan State came into this game having 7 turnovers in their first game. And, cut down those turnovers, you give yourself a lot better chance to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this is a problem. Obviously, not a lot of training camp, no preseason game or no non-conference games. You look at a team like Michigan State, new coach, everything that they had going on there with COVID and the new coaching staff coming in. You don't know what you were gonna get. And same thing with Maryland, new coach, new quarterback, and little Tua and. It's just you didn't know what you were going to get, and you saw 2 completely different games for the second game with both of them. I agree. I think Minnesota's defense is got a lot of issues right now. They need to work on. I was pretty impressed with Maryland's offense. They looked terrible against Northwestern, but I think Northwestern is better than so far what we're giving them credit for. Michigan. This has been the story with Jim Harbaugh, though, right? Like Jim Harbaugh cannot beat Michigan State and Ohio State. He can't do it. So I think it'll be interesting to watch Michigan going forward because offensively, I think they have something there with Milton still. I still think he's going to be a good quarterback for him. I still think they have things there. It's just they don't. I don't think it's the same thing every year, and especially this year. I don't think that they have the talent, and they have the guys that everyone thinks that they always have, right? Like we've talked about the gap between Ohio State and them is ginormous, and Ohio State gets the guys that Michigan thinks they get. So I think it'll be interesting watching them go forward when they play teams that are lesser competition than Ohio State and what Minnesota was thought of at the time when they play Northwestern and when they play Purdue and when they play these middle-of-the-road teams. How do they do against those teams going forward? Because if they can win those games like they're supposed to, they can still get to a decent spot at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean they've got one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten, in my opinion. This weekend they go to Indiana, which is a big one. Next weekend play Wisconsin at home. Hopefully Wisconsin gets their COVID situation figured out. I'd like to see them play another game at least. Then go to Rutgers, which you can't take Rutgers lightly this year.
Yeah.
You got Penn State at home, and then you got Maryland at home before the big one at Ohio State. So, I mean, they've got a really tough schedule. And, if they don't get more than 4 or 5 wins, I definitely think Jim Harbaugh could be out the door because they expected more from him.
I agree.
Last game I want to get into before we talk a little college football playoff and do some conference power rankings while looking back at our bets. Last game I want to get into is the UNC game, which ended up a big win for Virginia, 44-41. I know we were talking about this last week, looking at the line saying, is there something we're missing? Apparently there was something we were missing. And I think it was on the defensive side of UNC. They did not look very good. And, Bronco Mendenhall is a good coach. So when you do some little things not so well, he'll find a way to take advantage. What do you come away thinking after this one?
Yeah. I think that their UNC's offense is one of the best offenses in the ACC, and their defense is one of the worst defenses in the ACC. I work with a guy who is a big North Carolina fan, goes to a couple basketball games every year down there, and I was talking with him about it, and he said our offense can score on anybody, and our defense can't stop a nosebleed. So I think that's what we were missing. I think it was a little bit of an overreaction to also how bad Virginia's – or not an overreaction to how bad they played, but I think it was just coming off of Virginia's played Miami close in Miami the week before. I think the line kind of said Virginia might not be as bad as people think they are. I look at North Carolina. They play at Duke this week. You think maybe they can get back on schedule after 2 losses at Duke. But their defense is not as good as it needs to be if they want to compete in the ACC with Clemson. Because they're opposite of Clemson. They won't play Clemson until they meet them in Charlotte in the championship game, and they can't get there if they're losing to Virginia and Florida State this year, who are 2 teams that weren't expected to really do anything. So I think North Carolina's got some things to figure out defensively, but their offense is can put up points as quick as you need them to.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Their overs is definitely something I'll be looking at going forward on the betting side. Speaking of bets, I kind of want to do a quick little recap of what happened this past weekend with the bets we gave out. So I gave out 13 on the show, and I went 6-1 with a push in the Purdue game late thanks to Illinois. It seemed like all day I was sweating my bets. I had a couple backdoor. I had the Cincinnati one where they ran for a 48-yard touchdown with a minute and a half left to put them over. All day I was just sweating out my bets, and it wasn't fun.
Yeah. No, I understand. It's been tough to go recently. I think for the both of us. I don't know if I exactly gave it out, but I mentioned on I liked the Minnesota Maryland over.
Mhm.
I said I didn't feel comfortable laying the 22 with Minnesota, but I take the over. That game crushed the over almost in the first half. Like I said, bet against Kansas. My Iowa State Cyclones came through with backup Hunter Deckers throwing to Joe Skates to get that cover there. I was watching with my dad. We both had Iowa State minus uh, 20 something. So that was a big one. Obviously, the Georgia Kentucky over missed. West Virginia. This was the game I think, the most iffy on. I took West Virginia. I gave that one out. Um, I said I like Kansas State, but I think West Virginia wins the game, and they ended up winning by 27. Really kind of put the beat down on Kansas State. The one that I gave out that was one that I don't ever want to talk about again, the Coastal Carolina game, which how about them?
Yeah.
Coastal Carolina, man, go Chanticleers. I'm all here for it. But 51-0 against Georgia State. Georgia State just never had a chance in that game. So that one was a tough one to swallow. I think I gave out Rice, I think +1 or something like that. They ended up winning. So not a bad day for me. One of the trends there's two trends that I have been following this year that I don't remember if I gave these out last week or not, but I'll give them out this week. Is I've been Alabama is a team that seems to cover spreads. I took them in the first half this past week. I took them full game this week. They hit both of them. And then normally I like also Alabama overs, but playing Mississippi State, I didn't know what to get out of them. You had a good call. I don't think you gave this one out, but you texted me, said you had the Oklahoma Texas Tech over, which Oklahoma almost got by themselves. When Iowa State played Oklahoma a few weeks ago now, there was a stat that they gave out that Oklahoma is outscoring teams in the first quarter at that time, or maybe it was the next week against TCU. They were outscoring opponents in the first quarter 37-3. Made a note on my phone. Oklahoma first quarters finally took it one time this past week. I think they're up 21-3, and I think it was a 3-point spread in the first quarter. So that's another trend I'll be looking for. Lincoln Riley likes to jump out on top quick. And then the BYU, we both have, I think, been on BYU overs, and I've been on BYU spreads. We'll get into it later, but I'm really liking BYU -3 on the road this week. So not a bad week for me. Definitely doing better in college football than I am in the NFL. So not bad, but you can't win them all. But at least it's nice. At least I had a couple bets where I just sit back and let them go. So always looking to improve.
Yeah, another one I texted you about. A team that's actually kind of sneaky good is Wake Forest. I didn't actually say this one on the show, but they handled business against Syracuse. I watched the NC State Wake Forest game earlier in the year, and I thought Wake Forest probably could have won that game. I think they're a sneaky good team and somebody to keep an eye on, especially if they play some of these better teams and get some of these higher spreads. I think they could.
I think also, speaking off that, Syracuse is an interesting team when you look at betting, when you look at fading them betting wise. I mean, they obviously the line was massive against Clemson, but they hung in there against Clemson. They were only down by 6 at one point. But then you look at every other game they've played in. I mean, their closest game that they've won one game. They beat Georgia Tech by 17. But then you look at every other game, their closest loss was really the Clemson game. I mean, they lost by 26 to them, but they were right there in that game. Every other game, it seems like they get blown out. And so, they're 14-point underdogs at home this week to Boston College. We like what Boston College did this past week. Syracuse might be a team that similar to Kansas, similar to the New York Jets, similar to some of these other predominantly bad teams that you look and say, maybe we just fade them every week because they're losing convincingly. They're, as long as the line's not too big, they struggle to score. They they might just be a team going forward that we look at fade.
Yeah, the only thing with them is, I mean, they do play very bad, but they still try very hard.
Yeah.
They give a
Yeah.
lot of effort, and that's why you saw them cover that Clemson game. Is they like Dino Barbers, and I think he is a good coach. So they give a lot of effort, no matter what that score is. So that's the one thing that worries me about them going forward with bets. But other than that, I mean, I agree. I didn't have too many other notes.
Central Michigan recovered the fumble. Let's go. Let's go.
But I do like Cincinnati going forward because I think
Mhm.
they're going to get some favorable spreads because when you think about them, you think about their defense. You don't really think about their offense, but their offense has started clicking. So,
Yeah, and one thing to look at there, I don't know how in depth you go, but team total that they're playing too.
mhm.
Especially with these high-powered offenses that they're playing, those team totals. I mean, I got to think the SMU and Memphis team totals were probably in. I like to think probably close to 30. I think that's even against a good Cincinnati defense. I think it's realistic to think that SMU was at home was expected to score 28 to 30 points, somewhere around
Yeah.
in there. Same thing with
Well,
Memphis.
SMU also closed as favorites, and then you
Hmm.
look at the Memphis game. Memphis was only 7-point dogs, so I mean
Yeah,
their team totals had to be in the 20s. So that is definitely something to look at too. Is take those unders for teams going to face Cincinnati.
yeah. I mean, you look at the Cincinnati SMU line on ESPN closed. Since SMU 1 point favorites over under 57, so they're expecting the game to be 27, 28, somewhere around in there. 1 point game, high 20s.
Hmm.
I think team totals with whoever Cincinnati is playing, I think that those could be a play going forward just because of how good that defense has looked. And, I think they're going to be kind of high. I think no matter who they're playing, I still think when they're playing Houston and UCF and all these teams, their team totals are going to be a lot higher than what they're probably going to actually score. So I think those could be the play.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. So moving along here, I just want to get a quick thoughts from you on the college football playoff and your top four, and then give me your top four, and then two teams that you're watching.
You say two or three?
Two.
Two. I think number one right now, again, Clemson. I know Lawrence is out, but I think they haven't done anything to not deserve that number one spot. Two, I'm going to go with Alabama just because they've looked dominant the last couple games. Three, I'm going to go with Ohio State. And then four, right now, the number four team in the country, I think, is Georgia. And I think Georgia has the defense to be an elite team. I think offensively they have weapons around Bennett that can get them there. I don't trust Notre Dame right now. I don't believe in Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame gets the Michigan and the Texas treatment of they're better than what we think they are because of who they are. So I don't think Notre Dame deserves to be the number four team. I think Georgia does. The two teams that I'm watching, BYU. I've been on BYU all year. I'm sticking with them. I like what they're doing. And then the second team is I'm going to go with your Cincinnati Bobcats out of your American Conference. I think that we touched on the defense and their offense is good, but I think that the thing when a Power Five school plays a big time school like Alabama and Ohio State, it's they can't compete with them up front in the trenches, and that leads to lopsided games. I think Cincinnati right now defensively has shown that they can play big time, big boy, whatever you want to call it, football. So I like both those teams. I also you said two, but I also like Florida. I think Florida they beat Georgia this week. I really, really like Florida.
Mhm. All right, that's pretty interesting. I like a lot of those. I'm not so sure on Florida. I'm not. I mean, that defense still scares me. Uh, but we'll talk about them when we get into the Georgia game. My top four, you know, Clemson number one, like you said, they're missing Lawrence, but I still don't. I don't think it matters. I think DJ's, you plug him in and he's not as good as Lawrence, but his ceiling is up
Yeah.
there
Hmm.
still.
Hmm.
You got Bama too. Like you said, they've been rolling over teams. Ohio State three, and I've got Notre Dame four. I actually really like their defense. I think they match, like I said, I think they match up well defensively with Clemson. I think it'll be an interesting game. I do like Cincinnati as well. That defense is legit, and the way they have been making statements, they're not just winning, they are blowing out these teams.
Hmm.
And I think in a year like this year, the eye test is going to be a lot. So I think blowing out these teams, blowing out these high-powered offense will speak a lot. Uh, they play a pretty tough schedule. And then my sixth team, since you went with Georgia and Florida, I'm going to go with somebody else from the SEC, and I think it's Texas A&M. I think it's because they have the most favorable schedule coming down the
Hmm.
stretch. They don't really have to play anybody else left on their schedule. They should be favored in every single game going forward. And if they can continue to get things going on offense, I think they'll roll through that schedule, let Alabama and Georgia beat each other up, and you're sitting at one loss. So they might be somebody to keep an eye out.
Yeah.
They don't have letdown.
I I like the A&M pick. I understand it. The other reason I like Georgia and Florida going off of kind of countering that pick is that these two teams are in the East, so you beat you get both one of these teams will get a shot at Alabama in the championship game. So I think it's more realistic for one of those teams to make it than it is for A&M to make it. But I agree. A&M sitting there at with one loss.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama losing the championship game, they have one loss. Alabama still owns a tiebreaker because they beat A&M, but I do like A&M's an interesting team. I think that they're a team that it is very very um, much in contention for the SC for one of the best teams in the ACC or excuse me SEC.
On the one thing too to remember is they A&M beat Florida, so if Florida goes in, they beat Georgia, and then they lose to Bama. It's like, okay, well, clearly the West is still superior to the East.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helps them out a little, having that tiebreaker over Florida. Uh, but yeah, that's where I'm at with my top six. I haven't seen enough of BYU, in my opinion. I just haven't watched enough of their games. I'll definitely be watching that Friday night game, so I have more an opinion on them next week. I actually want to get into something a little different. I want to power rank the conferences, and I want to do 1 through 6. Do you want
Okay.
me to start, or do you want to start?
Um. Hmm. Let's make it interesting. Let's start with our sixth conference. Let's go
Okay.
one by one. What's your sixth?
So right now, my sixth conference is the Pac-12. We haven't seen anything from them. They returned this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, early polls suggested that nobody was really high on them. Highest ranked team was Oregon at 12. I don't even know when they released the original preseason polls. I think USC was ranked, but they were barely ranked. Um,
USC is still ranked.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the two best teams, and they're not ranked very highly, not thought of. Pac-12's been weird the last couple of years. They've really shot themselves in the foot. So I think they're 6 right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Washington's not going to be as good as they've been in the past two. Stanford's, I think, still figuring out their quarterback after Costello left. Um, yeah, I Pac-12 just haven't seen anything. They could surprise us for sure, but they're down there. They're down there, I think for sure. Um, five. Moving on to number five. the 5, I'm gonna actually go with. I'm between 2 here, and I'm actually gonna go with. It hurts me, but I'm gonna go with the Big 12. Um, I see you smiling there. I know. I saw you. You can see me contemplating it. I think the loss with Oklahoma State this past week hurt them. Um, I just there's no one in that conference that is making the case to be in the college football playoff. I mean, Iowa State and Kansas State are 4-1 right now in the conference at the top. Then it's Oklahoma State 3-1, and I said it last week. I'm going to say it again this week. This conference is carried by Oklahoma and Texas. When Oklahoma and Texas are not on the top, then the conference is not going to go anywhere, and that's the case this year. So I just the conference is good when they play each other. There's some good games. There's some good teams playing each other. But overall, there's better teams from better conferences.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you there. I think you hit it spot on, and I'll also give you another thing too about it, which will kind of lead me into my number 4. Is Tulsa played Oklahoma State very closely week 1. A lot of people took that as a negative, but it's actually turned out to be a positive. Tulsa's actually the only other team undefeated in the AAC right now, so they're a good team.
Which shouldn't be the case, but
Yeah,
yes, they
yes,
got lucky against
they got
ECF.
very lucky, but they're still right now the second best team in the AAC. Ultimately, I think they'll be about 4th or 5th, and them competing with one of the top teams in the Big 12, I think speaks a lot. So obviously, with my number 4, I'm going to go with the AAC, and I'll give you more reasons why. You've got Cincinnati, obviously clear number 1 right now. Your number 2 is probably between 3 to 4 teams. You throw in UCF, Memphis, SMU, Tulsa. Those 4 could all be labeled as your second. And then you go down there a little further, you got Tulane's, you got your ECUs, stuff like that. Of course, at the bottom, you've got South Florida, you've got Navy in there as well. I mean, overall, this conference has put together a solid year and shown that there's a lot more competition in this conference this year than, maybe the Big 12 and maybe than the Pac-12. I think this is a big year for the AAC, and I think they're showing people that they deserve at least to be a part of the conversation. Maybe not in the picture yet, but part of that conversation because they play good football. So that's my number 4. I assume you have the same.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's kind of the same. I mean, Cincinnati's had some good years in the past, but UCF has carried this conference the last few years, and Memphis has been right behind them. And neither one of those teams are. I mean, 3-2 and 2-2 are their records in conference, and neither one of them are carrying this conference. But I think it also putting the American atop the Big 12 also just speaks to Cincinnati. I mean, that's how good I think Cincinnati is. You hit on Tulsa. I think Tulsa is a good team. I think that they're going to be a team that gets to a bowl game against a Power 5 school and either keeps it insanely close and it comes down to the last possession or outright wins. SMU scares me a little bit simply because they lost two guys, but they can replace those guys. I think SMU is another very good team. So I'm going to go there with you. I think the American is number 4. My number 3, I'm going to go with the Big Ten with my number 3. And the biggest reason why I've 2 reasons why. Number 1, we talked. I know I've said it. I'm pretty sure you've said it. The gap between Ohio State and the number 2 team in that conference is as big, if not bigger, than the gap between Clemson and the rest of the conference. Obviously, with Lawrence being out this week against Notre Dame, it's not truly Clemson against Notre Dame. It's a makeshift Clemson offense with Lawrence out. But I still think that the rest of the ACC outside of Clemson is a little bit better than the rest of the Big Ten outside of Ohio State, with Michigan losing, with Michigan State being not as good as they've been in the last couple of years, in the past 10 years. Penn State's not showing. I mean, they're 0-2 right now. No one out of the Big Ten West right now is really playing. Is even ranked outside of Wisconsin. Obviously, Northwestern and Purdue. I've liked what I've seen from those teams, but they're not teams that are traditionally powerhouses in that conference. Wisconsin's on COVID right now. I mean, Indiana, who's not a not a football school, is 2-0 in that East, Big Ten East. So I think that Ohio State is one of the best teams in the conference, but they are behind. I think they're behind. The rest of the Big Ten is behind the rest of the ACC, and that's why I put the Big Ten at 2, and kind of leads into the ACC being number 3, or being the Big Ten at 3, ACC at 2.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let you give your number 1 because obviously it's the SEC.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Explain that a little bit, and then I'll get into mine.
I mean, the SEC, you look at them, they have one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country in Alabama. And then they have the 5 and the 8 nationally ranked teams in the East, Georgia and Florida. And I just talked a little bit earlier. I like Georgia and I like Florida. I think those are 2 good teams. I think this will be the best game of the week coming up when they play each other. But you hit on A&M. You like A&M. They're sitting right there ready to pounce as soon as Alabama slips. And then we both don't love Auburn, but Auburn's still a ranked team. They're still 4-2 in conference. They're still kind of hanging around there. So I just think the SEC has, it's the same thing every year. They have the best teams in the conference. Even when it's not like it was last year where we had Kentucky playing pretty good and LSU playing really, really good. We kind of had a couple more teams in there. This is kind of, I think, more of the traditionally powerhouse schools we've seen in the last 10, 15 years plus Texas A&M. So I just think they have more schools, and I think that their schools are better than every other schools at that equivalent. Their 1 is better than your 1. Their 2 is better than your 2, and so on. So I would go SEC, ACC, Big Ten, American, Big 12, and then the Pac-12.
Yeah, so I've got an interesting at the top 3, and I'll get into why I have it the way I do. So I've got 1A, 1B, and 1C, and it's SEC, ACC, Big Ten. The reason they're all tied for me is, like we've been saying, the gap between the top team and the next best team is large, and it's large in every single one of these conferences. And I know we don't exactly have Clemson with Trevor Lawrence being out against Notre Dame. I still think they win this game, and I still think they show that they're the best team in the conference by far.
I agree.
So I think that will happen this weekend. But the thing for me is, like you said, the Big Ten, with the West, you have no idea what's going on. I mean, who knows if Wisconsin's going to play next week? You don't know what's going on there. The East is down this year. I mean, when Indiana's your second best team right now, it speaks, the conference is kind of down. So they're having a down year. The ACC is actually surprisingly having a pretty good year, in my opinion. You've got North Carolina's got 2 bad losses, but they're still a good team. They're not great, but they're a good team. Miami's done nothing but win outside of that Clemson game, so they're a good team. Not exactly great as well, but they're still good. Manny Diaz has them going in the right direction. Mac Brown has North Carolina going in the right direction. You've got Notre Dame in the conference this year, so that helps them out. They're undefeated. We'll see how they really are this weekend. You also got BC, who's looked good under a first-year head coach. And, in my opinion, right now, the ACC is trending up. And it's trending up quickly because they have a lot of good coaches, a lot of good young coaches that are starting to build these programs. You're getting North Carolina built. You're getting Miami built. You're getting
not exactly a young coach.
Well, he's not a young coach, but he's a new coach. Yeah. He's starting to build that program again. You got Miami, you got him, you got Boston College. They're starting to build.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech hasn't been great, but they've shown signs that they're starting to move in the right direction. You've got all these younger coaches going to the ACC, and they're starting to build these programs. So that's why I have them second, because I think they're pushing for that top spot in the coming years. And I have the SEC 1A, and again, the gap between Bama and everybody else is large. I'm not, like I've said this a lot, I'm not big on Auburn. I don't think Auburn's that good.
Hmm.
LSU's having a down year. Mississippi State and Ole Miss are both bad. Arkansas's stingy, but they're not very good. And then you look into the East outside of Georgia and Florida, you don't really know what you have with anyone. Kentucky, Tennessee, Mizzou, Vanderbilt. I mean, you don't really know outside of them. So I think it's a down year for the Big Ten and the SEC, but it's an up year for the ACC, and I think the ACC is moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank thank God the Egg Bowl this year between Mississippi and Mississippi State isn't on Thanksgiving night like it has been the last couple of years, because that would be a horrific game to watch. No, I see what you're saying. I don't disagree with it. I agree with the fact that I think the ACC is getting better overall. I think that I do agree. I think there are some good coaches in there. I think there's some good programs trending upwards that are going to should be fairly decent in the next couple years. The thing with me though is you mentioned the gap between Alabama and the rest of the SEC. I see where you're going with that, but I still think I still think Georgia, Florida, and A&M, the 2, 3, and 4 teams in that conference right now, are head and shoulders better than the 2, 3, 4 teams in every other conference. The ACC probably not as much compared to the Big 10 and the Big 12, but I still think you give me Georgia, Florida, and A&M on a neutral field against any of those other schools from the other conferences, and I think those teams win outright. So that's why I think the SEC is the clear number one. But I do agree with you. I think that the ACC is trending upwards.
Well, I'll give you comparative teams from the SEC, compare them to the ACC. So your number one, you got Bama, Clemson. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty obvious. Number two, you got Notre Dame, you got Georgia. You're not as high on Notre Dame, but I actually like what I've seen from their defense. I think their defense is very good. Like I said a couple times already, I think they're going to match up very well against Clemson's offense. So I think those two teams, pretty comparable. Then you go to Florida. I think UNC is comparable to them. Both play very good offensively. Defensively, there's a lot of questions. And then you go to Miami.
What would
Texas
that over-under be?
Huh?
What would that over-under be?
Probably in the 80s, I would say. But then you go to Miami and A&M. Two teams that don't really – I mean, neither one has been super impressive, but they're winning games. They're playing winning football. So I think you make those comparisons. Yeah, I'd still probably rather have the SEC, and that's why they're my 1A. But I think, you've got those comparisons that you can make.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hate that for sure. I definitely understand. I definitely see where you're coming from, and I think it's a good comparison. I think it is closer than people think, but I still would take the SEC team. But the ACC, man, there's some good programs in there. I think would be beneficial to people to hitch their wagon to for the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll wrap up here, and we'll get into a preview.